Good morning, everyone. Before we begin, I want to make one thing clear. This presentation is not about attacking any profession, company, or individual. It is about understanding a pattern that exists across many industries whenever expertise, information, and decision-making come together. Most people believe they are evaluating products, services, or advisors. In reality, they are often evaluating something much deeper: the philosophy behind the advice they are receiving. The question is simple: is the person guiding you, helping you make an informed decision, or are they controlling access to the information required to make one? Today, we will examine a practical framework that helps distinguish between those two approaches. By the end of this presentation, you'll have a simple diagnostic system you can use to evaluate any professional advice, regardless of industry. This is Steve Koleno, and this is Confidential Remarks. Most consumers believe they are choosing between competing professionals, but very often that is not the real decision. The real decision is between two entirely different approaches to information. One philosophy relies on controlling information. It creates dependence by making the professional the primary source of answers, interpretation, and direction. The other philosophy relies on transparency. It gives the consumer access to information, context, and verification so they can participate in the decision-making process. At first glance, both approaches can look similar. Both may use expertise. Both may sound credible. Both may claim to be acting in your best interest. The difference becomes visible when you start asking questions. The moment information is challenged, one philosophy becomes more open, while the other becomes more protective. That distinction is the foundation for everything we will discuss today. Every professional relationship has an information architecture. In one model, information flows through a bottleneck. Data, analysis, and interpretation are concentrated in a single place. The professional becomes the gate through which everything must pass. This creates dependency because access is limited. In the other model, information is distributed. The consumer has visibility. The advisor has visibility. The process itself becomes visible. Instead of controlling information, the advisor helps organize and explain it. That distinction matters because information creates power. When information is hidden, power becomes concentrated. When information is shared, power becomes distributed. The question is not whether a professional possesses expertise. The question is whether that expertise is being used to create dependence or create understanding. The good news is that identifying the difference between a gatekeeper and an advisor does not require years of experience. It requires asking the right questions. A gatekeeping philosophy cannot survive direct examination because it depends on ambiguity, uncertainty, and information imbalance. An advisory philosophy welcomes examination because transparency strengthens trust rather than threatening it. The 6 questions in this framework are designed to reveal how someone thinks, not just what they say. Each question removes another layer of uncertainty and makes the underlying philosophy visible. As we move through them, notice that we're not evaluating personality, confidence, or reputation. We're evaluating behavior, and behavior is where the truth usually reveals itself. The first question is straightforward. How do you get paid? An advisor answers directly. They explain compensation structures, incentives, fees, commissions, and any factors that may influence recommendations. They show the numbers. A gatekeeper often avoids specifics. The conversation shifts toward value, expertise, or trust instead of answering the actual question. The reason this matters is simple. Incentives drive behavior. Understanding compensation does not automatically tell you whether advice is good or bad, but it does provide essential context for evaluating recommendations. Transparency creates confidence. Avoidance creates uncertainty, and uncertainty is often where dependence begins. The second question is equally revealing. What are my alternatives? An advisor explains multiple paths. They outline different service levels, different costs, different risks, and different trade-offs. Most importantly, they allow you to choose. A gatekeeper tends to present a single preferred path. Alternatives are minimized, discouraged, or framed as dangerous. When only one option appears reasonable, consumers often assume they have reached the best conclusion. But they may simply be seeing a narrowed set of choices. True advice expands understanding. Control narrows it. The presence or absence of meaningful alternatives tells you a great deal about which philosophy is at work. The third question focuses on accountability. How will success be measured? A gatekeeper often relies on subjective standards. Statements like, "Trust me," "I've been doing this for years," or "I'm the expert" become substitutes for measurable outcomes. An advisor takes a different approach. They define success before decisions are made. They identify metrics, standards, benchmarks, and criteria that can be independently evaluated. The goal is not blind trust. The goal is verification. When success is measurable, everyone understands the target. When success remains vague, accountability becomes difficult. And when accountability disappears, trust becomes the only remaining standard. The fourth question may be the most uncomfortable. What happens if I decide to leave? An advisor understands that informed consumers may choose different paths. They make processes understandable and transitions manageable. They are confident enough to let the relationship stand on its own merits. A gatekeeper often relies on uncertainty, pressure, or fear. The possibility of leaving threatens the structure because dependency is part of the model. Healthy relationships create freedom. Unhealthy relationships create obstacles. The easier it is to understand your options and move forward confidently, the more likely you are dealing with someone who values your autonomy rather than your dependence. The fifth question is powerful because it focuses on what may be hidden. What am I not seeing? Advisors welcome this question. They provide documentation, disclosures, comparisons, and context. They understand that transparency strengthens credibility. Gatekeepers often resist this line of inquiry because hidden incentives, hidden compensation, hidden trade-offs, and hidden conflicts are difficult to defend when exposed. Every important decision contains trade-offs. The question is whether those trade-offs are visible. When information is easy to access and easy to understand, consumers gain confidence. When information remains hidden, consumers become dependent on interpretation rather than evidence. The sixth and final question may be the most revealing of all. Who controls the standard? A gatekeeper often acts as both participant and referee. They define success, measure success, and report success. In other words, they control the scoreboard. An advisor prefers independent standards. They rely on measurements that are visible, consistent, and available to everyone. The reason this matters is straightforward. True accountability requires a standard that exists outside the person being evaluated. When independent standards are present, performance can be verified. When standards are controlled internally, accountability becomes difficult, and trust becomes mandatory. At this point, a pattern should be emerging. Across all 6 questions, the distinction is remarkably consistent. Gatekeepers avoid specificity. Advisors embrace it. Gatekeepers narrow choices. Advisors expand understanding. Gatekeepers rely on trust alone. Advisors welcome verification. This scorecard is not designed to label people. It is designed to evaluate behaviors, and behaviors are observable. When you consistently see transparency, measurable standards, documented disclosures, and independent accountability, you're likely dealing with an advisory mindset. When you consistently see ambiguity, pressure, hidden information, and self-defined standards, you're likely seeing a gatekeeping mindset. The framework is simple because the principle is simple. Transparency leaves a trail. Control leaves one too. Now we arrive at the deeper question. Why do these two approaches exist? Because they produce different power dynamics. Uncertainty combined with fear creates dependence. When consumers lack clarity, they become more reliant on the person controlling information. Verification combined with clarity creates agency. Consumers become capable of making informed decisions because they understand the criteria being used. A gatekeeper benefits when the standard remains unclear. An advisor benefits when the standard is visible. That is why accountable advisors are willing to hand you the scorecard before you make a decision. They understand that transparency may not always produce the outcome they want, but it will always produce a better decision-making process. As we conclude, I want to leave you with a single idea. A gatekeeper asks for trust. An advisor submits to verification. Those two philosophies sound similar at first, but they lead to very different outcomes. Trust is valuable, but trust becomes stronger when it can be supported by transparency, documentation, measurable standards, and independent validation. The most confident professionals are not afraid of scrutiny. They invite it. The willingness to be measured against an open standard is the opposite of gatekeeping, and that may be the clearest signal of all. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your thoughtful consideration of these ideas. This has been Confidential Remarks.